One night in March of 1977, Shirley Vane lay sick in bed while her 3 children were watching television. There came a knock on the door, and one of the children, 5-year-old Relford, opened the door and saw a total stranger. The stranger asked Relford whether his parents were at home. The little boy said his mother was ill, and before he could finish another sentence, the man forced himself into the house. He casually walked his way towards the television and turned it off. He pulled down the window blinds and then pulled out a gun. Relford and his 2 siblings were forcibly locked away in the bathroom, where they watched as the man stripped Shirley of her clothes, placed a plastic bag over her head, and tied a rope around her neck. The children could only watch helplessly as their mother was being tortured. In the following months, the man would send a postcard to the local newspaper with the simple question, "How many do I have to kill before I get a name in the paper or some national attention?" Hello and welcome back. Today, I'll be talking about Dennis Rader, a family man, government worker, and church leader by day, but at night, he would bind, torture, and kill his unsuspecting victims. This is the story of the BTK killer. If you enjoy learning about the world of murderous psychopaths, please leave a like and subscribe to save my channel from the murderous YouTube algorithm. I'm your host, Greenman, and this is the Murder Encyclopedia. Dennis Lynn Rader was the first son of 4 children, born to William E. Rader and his wife, Dorothea M. Cook. He was born, bred, and schooled in Wichita. However, not much is known about Dennis as a young child, except according to several reports, including his own confessions. He admitted that as a child he tortured animals by hanging cats and dogs in barns, which is one of the warning signs of the beginnings of a serial killer or potential psychopath. He also confessed that he harbored a sexual fetish for women's underwear. This fetish would later lead him into stealing panties from his victims and wearing them himself. Rader would proceed to Butler County Community College in El Dorado, where he earned a degree in electronics in 1973, and then proceeded to Wichita State University, where he graduated with a bachelor's degree in administrative justice. He married Paula Dietz on May 22, 1971, and together they had a son and a daughter. He first found work from 1972 to 1973 with Coleman Company as an assembler. From 1974 to 1988, Rader worked in an installation alarm system company called ADT Security Services. It is believed that it was in his employment at ADT Security Services that he learned how to defeat home security systems, which would enable him to carry out his dastardly acts without getting caught. Rader would move on to work in the compliance department at Park City, where his neighbors recalled him as being overzealous and extremely strict while carrying out his duty. A neighbor even complained that he euthanized her dog for no reason. He would continue working there until he got fired on March 2, 2005, 5 days after he was arrested for his highly publicized killings. Dennis Rader's murderous rampage began on January 15, 1974, when he killed 4 members of the Otero family. Joseph Otero was a former co-worker at the Coleman Equipment Company, and on the day he was killed by Rader, he was at home with his wife Julie Otero and 2 of his kids. Rader first severed their phone lines to ensure that they could not contact the authorities, and then entered the East Wichita home. He would then proceed to strangle the couple first, before killing the 2 children. The remaining 3 children of the Oteros would come back home from school later that day to discover the lifeless bodies of their parents and siblings. A traumatic experience no child should have to witness. Dennis Rader struck again on April 4, 1974. He managed to sneak his way into the home of Catherine Bright, another co-worker at Coleman, and lie in wait for her return. The victim would later arrive with her brother Kevin to find Rader waiting for them with a gun. Rader shot Kevin in the head at point-blank range, but Kevin would miraculously survive the attack. However, Catherine had no such luck, as Rader assaulted her and stabbed her to death. The police would eventually find some suspects for the Otero massacre in October of 1974, of which a young man would allegedly confess to committing the murders with 2 of his friends. A strange phone call to an editor in the Wichita Eagle newspaper would direct the police to a book and a letter at the Wichita Public Library. Inside the letter it read, "Those 3 dudes you have in custody are just talking to get publicity. The code words for me will be, bind them, torture them, kill them, BTK. This is where the nickname BTK first appeared. Rader would proceed to kill a woman named Shirley Vane on March 17, 1977, and another woman, Nancy Fox, on December 8, 1977. Shirley Vane was homesick when Rader knocked on her door. Her 5-year-old son let him into the house. a decision that would prove tragic over the course of 40 minutes. He bound Shirley so she couldn't move, while the kids were shoved together into the bathroom. To prevent the children from escaping, he tied a rope around the door handle to the bathroom sink, with only a small space left at the top of the door to see what was happening to their mother. A bed was also placed against the bathroom door for reinforcement. Shirley was already stripped of her clothes and had her head covered with a plastic bag. Rader had tied her up and proceeded to strangle her with a rope around her neck. The children kept banging on the door as this was happening. In his later confession, Rader stated that a ringing telephone caused him to leave early without murdering the children as well. In December of 1977, Rader became obsessed with stalking 25-year-old Nancy Fox. So on December 8th, he cut the phone line in her apartment and waited for her to return from work. Fox lived alone in the apartment, so he easily overpowered her when she finally came home. At gunpoint, he told her that he had sexual fantasies and that he was going to rape her. He ordered her into the bedroom while allowing her to partly remove her clothes before strangling her. Her body was discovered with semen on the nightgown that was next to her. Dennis Rader loved to seek attention, and his murders were done to fulfill that purpose. But the murders of Shirley Vane and Nancy Fox did not garner the attention he desperately wanted. On January 31st, 1978, he would reach out to the Wichita Eagle newspaper with a poem that began with, Shirley Locks, wilt thou be mine? A poem meant to draw attention that would connect him to the death of Shirley Vane, but the mail clerk passed it to the classified department under the impression that it was a love note. The world still didn't know who he was. They still hadn't heard his name. So in a truly bizarre letter written on February 10th, 1978, Rader would lay out his complaints stating, "How many do I have to kill before I get a name in the newspaper or some national attention?" Rader was obsessively searching for attention. He would then proceed to furnish the police with a letter bearing all the names they could call him. P.S. How about some names for me? It's time. 7 down and many more to go. I like the following. How about you? The BTK Strangler, Wichita Strangler, Poetic Strangler, the Bond Age Strangler, or Psycho, the Wichita Hangman, the Wichita Executioner, the Garrote Phantom, the Asphyxiator, BTK. This letter would prompt the police to call for a news conference to tell the Wichita community that the BTK killer was on the loose, and there was a reason to believe he wasn't done with the community just yet. On April 28, 1979, Dennis Rader set his sights on a 63-year-old woman by the name of Anna Williams. That morning, she would go to her mail and find a poem titled, "Oh Anna, why didn't you appear?" This letter had been from Rader, who had apparently been waiting for Anna to appear that night so he could attack her, but it seemed that she took too long to return to her house, so Rader gave up on the ambush. He would then write the letter to her, letting her know just how close she came to facing death at his hands. A truly blood-curdling thought. Dennis Rader's last known murder was on January 19, 1991. Without any clear provocation, he attacked the home of a retiree, Dolores Davis, by throwing a cinder block at the sliding doors of the house. He gained access to the house and proceeded to strangle the old woman who lived there, leaving her body to hang from a bridge where the authorities could find her. After his last kill, Rader would lie low for a very long time. Rader always loved the thrill of relaying his activities as the BTK killer to the authorities. Having been silent for a few years, he began to crave attention once more. In March 2004, Rader would write to the Wichita Eagle newspaper using the return address of Bill Thomas Kilman. The letter contained explicit pictures of a woman called Vicki Wegerle, who had been murdered in 1986. The writer of the letter confessed to her killings and furnished to the authorities enclosed photographs of the crime scene and a photocopy of her driver's license, which had been stolen at the scene of the crime. Later, Rader would send a puzzle to Cake TV. Inside the puzzle was a phony ID, chapter titles for a biography he wanted to be written for BTK, and a find the word letter grid spelling out clues for the authorities. Although the authorities could not demystify the puzzle, puzzle experts would later on realize that the letters RADER are grouped around the number 6220, and these numbers spelt out the author's street address. This was basically a fun game for the BTK killer. Confident in himself, Rader left another glaring message for the authorities in December. This time he left Nancy Fox's driver's license and a Barbie doll with a hood over its head and arms tied behind its back at a public location. This was evidence enough that the authorities were conversing with the real BTK killer. Rader would leave other clues for the authorities to find, like a cereal box on a road outside Wichita containing a graphic description of BTK's first murders and another doll fashioned in a death position. It was clear that Dennis Rader wanted to tell the world his story by all means. The authorities would find a message from Rader asking if he could send a message through a computer floppy disk without being traced. Of course, the police, who were desperate to find the man behind the murders, replied by putting an ad in the newspaper telling him that it was okay. On February 16, 2005, a floppy disk arrived by mail for the authorities. But as you can imagine, the police didn't keep their word, and they traced the floppy disk to a user called Dennis, whose location was at Christ Lutheran Church and Park City Library. Searching the internet, the authorities discovered that the president of the Christ Lutheran Church was none other than Dennis Rader. They found out that his daughter, Carrie, was in the hospital, and they proceeded there to get a pap smear for the purpose of generating DNA evidence. After several years, the police finally had a breakthrough. The DNA was a perfect match with the BTK killers. The police would move into swift action, and after close to 3 decades of going on a murder spree, justice was served to Dennis Rader on February 28, 2005, the day he was finally arrested for his crimes. He was taken into custody where he eventually confessed to his crimes after being shown DNA evidence that placed him at the scene of some of the murders. Rader seemed to relish his interview with the police. It seemed more like a bonding session than anything else. He didn't even look particularly upset that the authorities had gone back on their word and traced his floppy disk back to him. Following the conclusion of his trial, Rader is presently serving 10 consecutive life sentences. His life spared by the fact that Kansas did not have capital punishment at the time of his murders. He is currently serving his time in the El Dorado Correctional Facility and is not eligible for release before February 26, 2180. Many psychologists have attempted to demystify the motivations behind Rader's killings, but nothing really made sense, except that it was simply the actions of a sick and depraved man. However, some have speculated that his motivation was always his desperate need for attention. Not a lot is known about Rader's childhood, and as such, it is quite difficult to know if he lacked attention as a child and craved it so much that he resorted to murder. What are your thoughts on Dennis Rader, a natural-born killer or a man with underlying issues of childhood neglect? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe, because there's a lot more where this came from, here at the Murder Encyclopedia.